First and foremost, thanks to Sean for having me, and thanks for sponsoring this by yourself. Like, that's so awesome. I'm going to speak about developing hybrid apps. So, has anybody here developed for a mobile platform before? Just by show of hands. Did you have trouble picking or what platform you wanted to target between like iOS, Android, Windows Phone? And making that active decision, well, do I want to learn or program C#, or do I want to do Java, or do I want to do Objective-C and now Swift? Making that decision and then having the context switch between all those different programming languages and all the subtle nuances between them, but also between the actual APIs for those mobile platforms. Well, hybrid apps kind of take away some of that nuance. You can program in one language, JavaScript, most of the time. And you're able to target multiple platforms. So, I don't know how many of you realize or are familiar with this UI, but that's Instagram. That's what the Instagram app looks like. And originally, Instagram was a hybrid app around the time that Facebook acquired it. They've since built a native app. Some other one-time hybrid apps was the Facebook app. Actually, it's pretty funny, around like 2009, 2010. So pretty much recommended that you use the m.facebook.com. Anybody remember that era? And that was because their hybrid app was ridiculously slow, and Zuckerberg kind of shamed HTML5 hybrid apps for that. And then Accenture kind of got on his case, which Accenture is a hybrid framework as well. So he kind of got on his case and built like a Facebook clone that says, hey, we are just as fast. So it was the Facebook engineers, but hey. Twitter was one time hybrid, as well as Uber. Some current hybrid apps are Evernote, LinkedIn, Feedly, which is the RSS reader, and the Amazon app. And also their app store on Google is a hybrid app. Oh, and one thing about the Amazon app is that the specific reason that they targeted hybrid is because of a feature called Hot Code. And basically, what that is a feature where you can push updates to your internal app structure and the JavaScript without actually having to go through the app review process. So earlier, Alicia was speaking about her troubles getting her app approved into the App Store, and it took about 6 weeks. Well, she would probably still have to do that for the initial review, but once it's in there, you're good. You can just update it from your own server. You don't have to lie to Kiki. It's an urban saying. It's actually you ain't got to lie to Kiki, but I decided to be more grammatically correct for my talk. So it's pretty much a dodge saying that you don't have to put up a front or lie about who you are for me to accept you or for me to hang out with you or to be cool. And basically, that just goes back to my last slide, identifying some of those apps that we use almost every day that are hybrid apps and we don't know about it. They kind of don't tell you because there used to be a performance hit when you use hybrid apps. And so there kind of became a bad stigma with it and a confirmation bias. So people would like not want to use it if they knew it was hybrid. So they would hide that from you. That's not the case now. In recent years, Apple as well as Google have done considerable work on their WebView APIs to make them extremely fast. So nowadays, hybrid apps can be just as fast as native apps. Oh, and one plus two hybrid app development, since you're using JavaScript, which you're also using for your website, it gives you code reuse and more productivity. between your developers because they don't have to code switch all the time. Context switch, between different languages all the time. Has anybody worked with different languages and say you're doing Python today and Ruby tomorrow, or maybe even something like Go or Erlang, where it's like totally different paradigms. You're going from imperative to functional, and you make all kinds of mistakes, right? Yeah, so it kind of gets rid of all of that. Some hybrid app platforms that I want to highlight are Ratchet from the Bootstrap team. It looks a lot like Bootstrap and Twitter. Top Coat from Adobe. It's based almost on CSS, just styling components, native components with CSS. PhoneGap from Adobe. That was a big one before a lot of the other ones came out, and it got a lot of the blame because it didn't have a native UI framework that it came with. You kind of had a blank slate and you had to build your own. So you could tell that these hybrid apps were hybrid apps. People were able to tell and they didn't really like it. The app framework from /XDK from Intel is of note because they have made a partnership with Ionic, which is another app framework that I'm going to be focusing on in this talk, and Kendo UI from Solidity. So, Ionic framework, what is Ionic? Ionic is the Ionic framework is part of the larger Ionic platform, their ecosystem. They have push notifications, a build server, assets, building, all type of things, but the Ionic framework specifically is for building hybrid apps, and it's a collection of Apache Cordova, which is the same open source technology that PhoneGap runs on. It's basically how the hybrid app maps to the native frameworks using Apache Cordova. NG Cordova is an Angular directive or extension that allows AngularJS to talk to Cordova, which then talks to the native libraries. Of course, they're using AngularJS to provide some CSS and JavaScript components, which I'll kind of show in a little bit. And they use SAS to style with CSS. Also, to build your SAS and compile it to the CSS, they use npm and Go. And you also use npm to install Cordova plugins, which I'll go over now. So, Cordova plugins are how you access the native API that you want to target. Say you wanted to do something like hot code, like I said earlier. There are a couple plugins for that because most of these are third-party plugins. So somebody might not like the way you wrote your plugin; they want to write their own plugin. It does the same thing. You have push notifications, in-app purchases. If you want to do Apple or Google Pay, you can do that. And even like the new Force Touch and 3D Touch stuff in the 6S, 6S Plus, you can do all of that in a hybrid app. And I was speaking with Alicia again earlier, and she was sharing with me that she wasn't really interested in hybrid app development because she felt that some things that she needed to do in her apps, she wouldn't be able to do a hybrid, but that's not exactly true. So yeah, if you decide to go down the route of doing hybrid apps, just make sure you check everything out, like as far as plugins, and make sure that you're able to target the specific APIs that you want to include in your apps. Before I go into my quick start on Ionic, forgive me for jumping out of my slides, I wanted to come here and show you guys some of the Ionic components. So they have this header bar here. I had to cheat a little bit since there's no internet. I preloaded my stuff in advance. So they have like all these pre-written styles, so you can go in and add your own, add a specific colored header bar, but you can change those styles to whatever colors you want with the size. They have a nav view plugin, so it tracks where you're going in the app, and you can easily go back, between pages and whatnot. They also have action sheets, so it's like all this native feeling interactions in a hybrid app, and even like toggles. And here you can see, I don't know if you guys can read the text, but you get that two-way data binding from Angular. So if you slide the checkboxes, it'll go from false to true. And they also have a library of icons that you can use as well. So I wanted to demo a app. I'm not sure if this is going to work. There we go. It's finally working. I didn't create this, but this is an app called Polar. It is a hybrid app, and basically what it does is allow you to edit images. It's kind of like competing with like Photoshop and Lightroom and things like that. So I don't know if you guys are seeing like the effects that I'm adding in here. But basically what it's doing is running 3JS in the background, which is a JavaScript library for image editing. And so if I come here, I can go through all of my history and undo some of those changes, go back to the original. So yeah, hybrid apps they're compensated, they can compete. Going back to the slides. So just a quick start for Ionic. I am not able to run some of these commands myself because of the internet. But what I did was run them in advance, take screenshots, and throw them in my talk. So if you want to install Ionic, you would run npm install -g on passive Cordova and Ionic. And so it would install Cordova and pull down all the frameworks, all the files for Ionic for you. You may, depending on how of course Node is a prerequisite for npm, and depending on how you have Node and npm installed, you may or may not have to use the sudo command to pin that and give you privileges to install that globally. Once Ionic and Cordova is installed, you would run Ionic start the app name, whatever you want your app to be called, followed by the template that you want to use. So Ionic has these templates that they give you to kind of ease your development process. You have like a blank template, which I used here in this example. They also have like a tab bar template and a navigation template, which has like a slide out navigation to kind of speed things up for you if you know that you want the actual functionality in your app. So when it creates your app, it instructs you to cd into that directory, because basically how the command line tool works, you have to be in that project directory for those commands to work. If say you wanted to use Sass to style some components, you would Ionic set up Sass. In order to do that, you would also have to have Gulp installed beforehand. If you wanted to test it in a web browser, you would Ionic serve, and it would open up a web browser for you. It'll ask if you wanted to use localhost or some random IP address that they would generate on the fly for you. You have that option, or you could test it on a device. But in order to do that, you would have to Ionic platform add iOS or Ionic platform add Android. The sweet thing is, if you're developing on a Apple computer, it'll automatically add the iOS platform for you. If you're developing on Linux or Windows, it'll automatically add Android for you. Typically, you're not allowed to build for iOS if you're not on an Apple computer. But some services, like I said, Ionic has a build services in alpha. And most of their alpha, all of their alpha services are free until they figure out their business model. But I'm sure they're probably going to charge for that. But on their Ionic build server, you're actually able to build for iOS on a non-iOS device. And also, PhoneGap has a build service as well, where you can build apps in the cloud for iOS and Android. And that's just more commands that they are giving you. You can emulate for iOS or Android using the emulators that come with the SDK. It's not really advised for Android because I don't know if you guys do Android development, but the emulator is like extremely slow. Unless you're using something like Genymotion, but that's like beyond the scope of this talk. And I saw a video somewhere where somebody said they asked the Android engineer why why are the emulators so slow? And they're like, dude, everybody just uses a device. So that was kind of dry humor, but yeah. So if you want to run it on a device, you have to build it first, and then run it. I think that's it. So yeah. So I basically went over all that already. So yeah, now go forth and build some nice things with Ionic. Thank you. Yeah, what's up, Aaron?
You mentioned a few apps that are masquerading or that are hybrid, but they don't sell us. How can you tell if an app is a hybrid app?
Nowadays, you really can't because performance. Hybrid apps are performing, and it's gotten to a point where people have mastered styling CSS and JavaScript to kind of mimic the native platform UI components. So you can't really tell unless they tell you.
So one of the challenges with Android is that you have so many devices with so many capabilities.
Yeah.
Do any of these kind of help with that? Like, because the fact that you're why do you jQuery? Some reasonable part of it is because it hides all the browser differences, right? Do any of these do something similar for you? I guess because they have better ways of adapting to different devices, or that does it really solve that problem?
Sorry, can you rephrase?
So the problem being that since you're able to write in this sort of other language and then you're kind of generating web views, right?
Right.
Are they kind of doing a lot of the helping you also with the multiple browser, the device, what should I say? Lots of devices for Android, it helps solve that problem as well, like helping you not have to deal with device-specific bugs.
Sort of like fragmentation.
Fragmentation is what I think. Yes.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they actually are tapping into like the app support libraries for like Android and stuff like that. I'm not that sure. I can't really answer that. I'm sorry. Oh yes, I'm sorry.
Of course. So right now this is free, presumably you're just installing and using it, but do you know what their future business model is going to be? Because I'm thinking about it in my research lab, we've talked about using something like this for a long time, but I remember I've heard the company that does Mono or bought Mono.
Oh yeah, Xamarin. Yeah.
Xamarin bought that and it was like a decent price, and all of a sudden with the new version, the price got ridiculous. Because there's a cost to learning a new framework, right? So do you have any insider knowledge that you've seen as a user of this about what their plans for monetization are going to be, and whether they're going to withhold features or anything like that?
So I've been reading their blog, and they're not really wanting to give out specific information. I guess they don't want to get stuck if they find that price point isn't really feasible or scalable. So yeah, to answer your question, they're not really actively, or they haven't specifically said we want to stick around this number or price point. But he actually brought up something else that I didn't really talk about because I wanted to stay with like web frameworks. But Xamarin, Xamarin is another cross-platform development framework. It actually uses C#. So you can write once for 3 different platforms. Well, almost. You can write in C# for iOS and Android, and you can, with minor tweaking, use that same code for Windows Phone and I guess Windows 8 or 10 now. Yeah. So, and also at Microsoft's Build conference earlier this year, Microsoft also did a agreement with Ionic to help them support Microsoft platforms so that you can also not only build for iOS and Android, but build for Windows as well.
When you showed components like the toggles, for instance, are there is there like a built-in library where it's going to automatically style those for the different platforms, or are there third-party libraries that do that styling for you?
Well, yes. So all of these are there are directives in AngularJS that are being used. So there's actual CSS included in Ionic that you could go in and style if you wanted.
But if I don't style it at all, would it look like the native platform?
Yes. Any other questions? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, in the back.
Yeah, I just want to find out, would you be willing to share your slides?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, because I think there's some interesting opinions about groups of packages that might be useful for other people I think I might be interested in?
Yeah, so my GitHub is MK Turner, MKTURNER.
Yeah.
The slides will be there in a few days. Maybe I'll try to get them up by tomorrow night. If not, shoot me a tweet at Marvin K Turner, and I will definitely get that up as soon as possible. Thank you all so much for sticking around for my code.
All right, well, that's it, actually. We've got the room till 6, so if you were just enjoying talking to somebody, you're welcome to hang around and do that as much as you want. But that is all of the talks. Thank all of you for coming out and for being part of this. I have enjoyed it immensely, and I hope you did too. Thank you.